Welcome to Breakout Investors. Today we are happy to welcome back the management of Boardwalktech, ticker BWLKF, specifically the company's CEO Andy Duncan. Joining me on today's call is Breakout Investor Florian Buschek. This call is being recorded on May 10th, 2022, and will be distributed via the Breakout Investor channel on YouTube and via our podcasting network. Look for Breakout Investor content wherever you subscribe to podcasts. We are on Apple, Spotify, Audible, and most other platforms. Supporting materials for today's discussion will be posted on the Breakout Investors Collaboration app, available on the app stores and at app.breakoutinvestors.com. The application and much of the research content is free. After registering or logging in, use the search bar at the top right of any page, type in the ticker, and the results will give you a link to the research post for this presentation and to other discussion and research related to today's company. Those of you already on the platform can share your questions for the company using the Discuss tab in Florian's breakout room. So let's get started with me handing the call over to Florian. Florian?
Yeah, I guess we can immediately start with a small presentation from Andy about Boardwalktech and recent progress, and then we get into Q&A.
Great. Thanks, Florian. Happy to kind of walk everybody through and give everybody an update. So the vision of Boardwalktech is to create a single version of the truth for enterprise information, unifying structured and unstructured data for faster, more insightful information. I think that many of you that kind of know the story know that we currently have 21 of the Fortune 500 as customers today. And those companies include companies like Apple Computer, Ernst & Young, Estee Lauder, Verizon Wireless, a number of really leading companies in their particular space. And the focus that Boardwalktech has is on working with companies to help them to manage their both structured and unstructured data. So if you take a look today at what's going on within the enterprise itself, although companies have spent a tremendous amount of money on their transactional systems of record like SAP and Oracle, the net is that most of the work that's done in large organizations today is done in Microsoft Excel. And the reason that happens is that as an information worker, your duty across the organization is to go out and collect data from different places, bring that data someplace to be able to analyze it and make a decision. You know, do we order more of this? Do we manufacture more of that? Do we believe that the sales forecast for this is correct? There are a multitude of information decisions that need to be made, you know, every minute, every hour within these organizations. And the problem is that data within a large organization today is really a mess. There's information that sits in different transactional systems of record, and it's very difficult for somebody to be able to capture that data and then make sense of the data. And frankly, what happens is that most of these companies and most of the information workers use Microsoft Excel as the repository to be able to go out, collect data from different places in the organization, and then line that data up in a row and a column. And then what happens is that as they're lining that data up in a row or a column, they start to add formulas to the spreadsheet to say, well, what if this happens and what if that happens? And then as they do that, they start to email the spreadsheet around, and before you know it, you've got chaos that looks like the left-hand side of the screen, where you've got 50 people that are trying to come to a decision, and they're emailing these spreadsheets around, and no one knows who made the change to cell M21 or Z15. No one knows what version they're supposed to be on. It's frankly a mess. And so what we developed is something called the Boardwalk digital platform. And effectively what we do is we take these spreadsheet processes here that have been matured over a long period of time in large enterprises, and we have a single schema format where we basically suck them into our digital ledger automatically. It takes a minute. And then from there, we actually allow people to be able to connect between their local copy of the spreadsheet that they're working on and the Boardwalk Digital Ledger. And the Boardwalk Digital Ledger now not only creates what we call the single version of the truth of data, but we also allow you to be able to make your changes offline in your spreadsheet. And then when you're ready to share those changes, instead of emailing the spreadsheets around, you basically hit submit refresh and the data comes into the digital ledger. And in our digital ledger, we actually are managing all of the information and we're chaining the transactions together utilizing a blockchain technology in the back end that allows us to be able to keep track of who made the change, what time was the change made, and keep track of every single change made. So now what we've created is we've created this platform that allows you to be able to get control of all of this mess within your enterprise and be able to share data in a real-time basis that allows you to be able to get to a decision much faster. And on top of that, the platform has a whole bunch of tools that allow you to be able to connect with your enterprise data, to be able to collaborate back and forth. So as an example, Apple Computer uses us today to be able to communicate with not only their component suppliers, but also a lot of their manufacturing facilities, most of which are outsourced, where before you might have someone sitting in Cupertino that was emailing 50 spreadsheets around, to Asia, to all over the world, trying to figure out, can you fill this order for these cameras? Well, I'll pay, $8.92 for the camera. Can you meet the demand? And everybody's just scrambling to try and figure it out. And it looks like this. Move it into the digital ledger. Got real-time connectivity. You're making real-time decisions. You've also got a complete historical record of what the other party said. And it's really helped them to be able to greatly improve the way in which they manage the relationship with these suppliers. And this is pretty consistent that we see across many, many major organizations. So the bottom line is that we license this digital ledger platform to these large organizations, and they utilize us to basically move a lot of these spreadsheet applications into our digital ledger, which improves their process dramatically. So when you look at kind of a typical, a typical environment today within an enterprise, about 80% of of an enterprise's data is unstructured today, and a spreadsheet is considered a piece of unstructured data. So while these large enterprises have done a very good job on their structured, ERP systems and financial systems and all of that, the net is that there's really not a lot that's going on with regard to this unstructured data, and this is the area where Boardwalk focuses. Also, I think it's important to understand that about 90% of the data in an enterprise has been created in the last 2 years. So think about that. Think about the fact that data is doubling in the enterprise every 2 years. Like, who's taking control of this data? Who's helping the information worker deal with this? And the size of this market is just immense. It's about $50 billion, according to global industry analysts, by 2026 of big data, of which 80% of that is all of this unstructured data. So again, the focus with Boardwalk is helping companies to be able to appropriately manage their unstructured data environment. So when you look at, what we do for these large enterprises, and this goes back to my discussion around, large enterprises like SAP or large enterprises that have implemented these big transactional systems of record like SAP and Oracle, Salesforce, Slack. The net is that we really look at ourselves as a very important part of the technology stack for a large enterprise. And when they license us, we actually come in, we can install the software either behind the firewall or offer it as a cloud service. And all of our entire focus is on the unstructured data management which of course makes up a lot of these Microsoft Excel spreadsheets, but there's a lot of other things that are made up within an unstructured piece of data, such as PDF files, Word files, and so forth. So we talk about how these companies, because they don't have a strategy with regard to unstructured data, that they really need to have a strategy, and there really are no other vendors out there that kind of has the same technology that we do, that allows us to be able to absorb this data very rapidly and be able to provide a solution quickly. And we think that this is kind of the last mile within the enterprise with regard to digital transformation. These companies have been talking about digital transformation for a long, long time, and this really is kind of the one last piece of the puzzle that will allow an enterprise to get to 100% digital transformation, which of course, if you can do that, it allows you to be able to, not only improve the security, the auditability, but also the compliance for all of this unstructured data. And then, of course, connecting everybody together in this that allows you to be able to make real-time decisions is very important. So Florian earlier had talked about the fact that we made an announcement with regard to one of the top 5 banks in the United States that has adopted and licensed the Boardwalk digital ledger platform. So keep in mind, we've got 21 of the Fortune 500. I'll show you kind of a partial customer list in a minute. But this is the first time that we've actually moved into the financial services space. And I've been talking about us working on this deal. We've been working on this deal now for about 14 months. It took a long time. But this is a watershed event for not only the company, but also for the bank and being able to solve this problem. Well, let me explain what happened. So back in November of 2020, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency issued a press release where they penalized this bank $400 million for their lack of compliance with regard to unstructured data, and mainly with regard to Microsoft Excel processes and applications that the bank has used across the bank. And there's about 30,000 of these spreadsheets across the bank that has been that are not basically in compliance per the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. So we were not chasing this market, and what happened was that we were brought in by a large IT services company, a $10 billion IT services company that is a partner of ours and also a customer that uses the Boardwalk Digital Ledger internally. And they said, look, you guys are experts with regard to, managing Microsoft Excel and making it compliant and moving it into your digital ledger. Would you work with us with this bank to be able to solve the problem? And we said, of course. So we entered this. We had 150 meetings over the 15 months or 14 months, crazy number of meetings, but we started in one division. And then we moved to another division, and then we moved to the third division, and we eventually ended up with an enterprise deal, multi-million-dollar contract that basically they have licensed our technology to be able to solve the compliance problem with all of the spreadsheets that they have across the organization. And again, this particular slide will show you, how important that is, because if you've got 30,000 of these spreadsheets running around, again, as unstructured data, you need a place to be able to manage them, improve the process, but more importantly for the bank, get them into compliance. And so we're really proud of the fact that we won this deal. And again, it's a watershed significant deal for us. I had resisted going into the financial services market just because we didn't have enough expertise or enough bodies to be able to chase it, but we now are headlong into the financial services space. As investors, think about the fact that if all of these banks have this problem of unstructured Microsoft Excel spreadsheets that are basically running a lot of sections of the bank, where a lot of data is coming in there, and they need to find a way to get into compliance, or they may face a penalty. The market for Boardwalk alone in this financial services space is enormous. You do the math and you say, gee, Andy, if you guys can win over the next 48 months, 100 banks, and they're going to pay you a couple $1 million a year on average on a software as a service license agreement to deploy your software, and you guys have this unique technology that's patented that can solve the problem better than anybody else, you can very quickly draw get to a conclusion that Boardwalk is really on its way to being a very large company, running at 86% gross margins today, and sitting on top of a very exciting opportunity moving forward into the financial services space. Not to dwell on the financial services space, because while that is very exciting, the company has a lot of opportunity, not only with existing customers that we have today, where when we land into an existing account with the digital ledger, we believe that there are hundreds of these Microsoft Excel processes that are running kind of behind the scenes within these large enterprises that need to be moved over onto the Boardwalk digital ledger. And so when we license the technology, we have this land and expand strategy where we get in and then we start to add additional spreadsheets and additional users onto the digital ledger. And every time we do that, we increase our recurring revenue number through the license agreement that we have with that company. Give you an example, Estee Lauder here that we started with about 16 months ago. We now have hundreds of users on the system today, multiple applications that are mission critical to Estee Lauder that's running on the Boardwalk digital ledger, and basically almost a greenfield of opportunity to be able to continue to add additional value to Estee Lauder as we're moving other applications that they're running across their organization onto the Boardwalk digital ledger, doing digital transformation and moving these manually operated and based Excel spreadsheet processes into a digital world, which really helps them with collaboration. It helps them with efficiency, it helps them with compliance, and it helps them from an analytical standpoint really improve the reliability and the speed of the decision making that they're making utilizing this data through analytics. This is a slide that shows the customers that we have today. Again, you can see Levi's, Ernst & Young, that was one of our largest customers, or that was our largest customer before we landed the large bank. And I'm sorry, we're under non-disclosure. I can't publicly disclose the name of the bank. Hopefully in the future, they'll relent and we'll be able to do it. But I think if you were to go out and take a look at the press release from the OCC, you will certainly be able to see the bank's name. And I'm just trying to stay pure and hold to the contract that we have and not name the bank. But EY was our largest customer. And then, of course, the bank came in. We were utilized by EY within their tax technology practice. And then again, other great companies like Coca-Cola, Mars, Qualcomm, General Mills, Apple, Broadcom, wide number of customers. So we've got kind of two focus points today. One is we're continuing to win new contracts. We also just announced a couple of weeks ago a new contract with a bank in India And so you're going to see us continue to add new logos and names to kind of the Boardwalk list of large companies that are utilizing us and utilizing the platform. But we also have got a whole team that's working on account management within each of these large organizations, where we get in and we kind of call land and expand. So we get in and then we just continue to drive that recurring revenue up with each customer as we expand additional opportunities within each of those customers. A little bit about the company itself from a financial standpoint. Again, 33% CAGR on recurring revenue from since 2018, when we basically shifted away from a perpetual model over to a SaaS model, which was a kind of a big transition for the company. 70% of our revenue is coming from new contracts. We've got a pipeline of 7.6 million currently. We had been flashing, Florian, previously a $9 million pipeline, but when the bank closed, we had to take that off the pipeline. But we've since added some additional revenue onto the pipeline, so you can't extract 9 million down to 7.6 as the value of the bank contract. But we wanted to be pure in the way in which we kind of talk about our current pipeline. So when we did land that big deal, it did reduce our pipeline, but the pipeline is still very strong and very robust. And then, of course, 86% gross margins. Some of the issue around our cap structure, I didn't look at our share price today, but as of May 2nd, it was 52 cents Canadian. We're traded on the Canadian exchange, also on the OTCQB, soon to be moving to the QX, by the way. And we're good shape with regard to cash. We're not out raising any money. We don't have any intention of raising any money. And in fact, we are driving, within the next quarter or so, we should be EBITDA positive, especially with the advent of this large banking contract that we closed. So, the company's balance sheet is really clean. We're in really good shape with regard to cash, expense, and driving toward EBITDA positive. Some of you that know the company know that we had previously some debt on the balance sheet, and that was completely paid off in March of last year. We're proud of that, and we think we're really poised for terrific growth here. And I think you're going to really start to see when we start to report our kind of first fiscal quarter, some really great results going forward. So that's an update on the company. I'm very happy to take any questions that you may have.
I do have some questions, and then we will see if the audience has some as well.
Okay.
So number one for me would be, as you grow revenue, do you need any additional resources for that? Are you going to have additional expenses? How does that scalability look like?
Right. So with regard to the banking channel, we've decided to utilize the channel for that. And so the partner that we're working with on this deal is this company called HCL. They're very excited about it because they actually are able to do a lot of the professional services work to be able to deploy this across the bank. And so therefore, we really won't have to hire any additional resources to be able to manage that. And so this is a wonderful deal, not only from a margin standpoint, where we're going to be basically booking, the net revenue on this deal, but very minimal expense with regard to professional services. And which means, by the way, this is very scalable. So we've since Florian gone out, and we've been in parallel while we've been working on this bank deal. We've been soliciting and educating a lot of the other IT services companies that sell into banks and partner with banks. So think of companies like Capgemini and Infosys and Virtusa and all of these companies. And I've got one of my senior executives that's doing nothing but working on this particular channel to educate them. And we actually have some very exciting things happening in the channel where once these large IT services companies that might have literally 10,000 people in India working at one of, at these banks, that they said, wait a minute, this is a great opportunity for us. This is the last piece of digital transformation. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency is starting to mandate this. I want to make money on this, and I want to be able to bring in Boardwalk as my partner to be able to do this, and they'll drive revenue by professional services. We'll drive revenue with a direct license contract with the bank, and it's just a perfect scenario for us. With regard to growth in the other area of the business with our direct sales, yeah, we are under pressure with regard to resources, as I think a lot of companies are today. We actually just onboarded 2 brand new salespeople that we hired within the past 2 weeks. So we're definitely spending more money from a sales standpoint, but we're not going to have to go out and raise a bunch of money to hire a bunch of people unless we're so overwhelmed with business that that we're going to have to spend that money to do it.
And just with respect to financial institutions, do you see any additional opportunities already just on the back of that deal you just closed?
Sure. Well, the deal that we announced in India, which is a bank called ICICI Bank, they're a worldwide bank in 17 countries, including they have branches in the U.S., but their predominant market is in India. That deal happened, fairly rapidly, but we actually have seen a lot of interest in the past 3 weeks now, especially after the press release came out. And especially after we've been able to go back to this channel and say, we told you we were going to win this deal. We've won this deal. Our technology is very unique and really no one else can solve this problem for the bank. And therefore, we now need to start to work with you. So I think you're going to see some real interest over the next 12 months. I also caution, and again, not being negative, just being, a conservative, CEO. These big banks take a while to land, right? And they just don't sign a contract and say, okay, let's go, right? And so, this is going to be it's going to be a grind, but once you get them and you're in, it's really good. Let me just take 2 minutes and explain the uniqueness of our technology and why I think that the investors should be excited. When you look at having 30,000 spreadsheets today, which is not uncommon, by the way. I mean, a large organization, like Apple has got thousands. Okay, banks just happen to have more. They've been trying to solve this problem for a few years, and they actually have licensed technology. And they've hired IT professionals to come in and try and solve this problem. And here's what happens. Let's say you've got a spreadsheet and it's got 1 million cells. And let's say that once a day, you share that spreadsheet with 25 people, and you're pulling data out of your systems of record. You're cutting and pasting that data into a column or a row. And 2 hours out of your day is spent managing the spreadsheet that your boss needs to have by 4 o'clock to post something within the bank's transactional system of record, or to create a report so that you've got a validation of the decisions that you made that day. Okay, this is really what happens all day. In order to convert that 1 million cell spreadsheet that might have 1,000 formulas and 20 macros, the only way to do it today is to be able to effectively rewrite that spreadsheet into a regular application, which means you have to build a data model, you have to build an intelligence layer, and most of the companies that sell these low code or no code platforms where they're trying to get you to convert these into an application require that you use a browser UI. So what happens is that, and that process, by the way, rewriting an application where you've got to rewrite 1,000 lines or 1,000 formulas into 1,000 lines of code to do the same, to get to the same result, right? The what ifs. That can take 3 to 4 months, and it can take 2 or 3 people. So you do the math and say, okay, you got 30,000 of these things. It's going to take 3 people, 3 months. It's not scalable. On top of that, the bank employees say, wait a minute, I've been running this spreadsheet and I've matured this spreadsheet for 8 years. This is running my business unit. You can't take that away from me and force me into some funky browser that isn't going to allow me to have the flexibility to be able to get my job done. And this is the problem that the bank has. And so what Boardwalk has this very unique technology that is patented that allows us to absorb the spreadsheet into our database. We then allow the user to continue to use Excel in its native format on their desktop with no change at all, okay? And all we're doing is taking that spreadsheet and connecting all of the data cells, which is part of our technology, into our digital ledger system so that we know who's making the change, and we've got a complete historical record of how those changes were made. And by utilizing the Boardwalk system, we actually are moving that spreadsheet into compliance based upon the requirements of the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. So they get the best of all worlds. They continue to use their existing spreadsheet that they know and love, yet we're providing a compliant environment, and all of that can happen for the simple spreadsheets in a matter of hours. For the more difficult one, it can be days, and for the really, really complex ones, it might take a week or two. And the bottom line is that this is scalable. Okay, and no one else has this technology, and it's quite exciting for us to be able to have landed one of these top 5 banks in the US, the world, that has said, I've done my due diligence and no one else can do this. This is really how we're going to solve the problem. Let's do an enterprise deal across the entire bank's 3 big business units, and let's go get this. And so we really do believe that the opportunity with all of these other banks is there. It just, again, setting expectations, it takes time, because these banks, they don't move fast, but when they move, they move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for this explanation. I think this is exactly the key aspect of the company. You mentioned it took about 14 months to prepare this deal. Basically, would you expect other similar deals to take that long as well? Or do you think there are some kind of learning effects?
Yeah, I think so. Through this deal, we've learned a lot, not only about the bank and bank processes. So this was just as much a learning experience for us as it was for the bank on doing this. But but I do believe, Florian, that the sales cycle will be shortened from the 14, 15 months that it took us to close this deal, just because it was our first one. And we've also need to continue to build some credibility. I mean, imagine if we can get another 4 or 5 of these large banks signed up, then you kind of become the gold standard. And when that happens, those sales cycles will improve for us. But again, just getting through the procurement process of some of these large banks, the contract and the procurement piece of it, not to get too detailed, it took us 4 months. Okay, I mean, so it's hard, and but again, once you get in, you're in and approved, you're in really good shape, and so we definitely think that we will see some improvement on the sales cycles. I can't ever see that the sales cycle will be less than kind of 4 to 6 months, just because of how long it takes. But I think we can eventually get there.
Okay, and then to a different topic. About a year ago, you have announced initial business with a social media company. Initially just service, expected to grow into recurring revenue. Is there any update on that?
Yeah, thank you for asking about that. So that particular deal continues to work. We are doing great. The uniqueness about this deal is that this particular very large social media company based in the San Francisco Bay Area, rarely do they license technology. They are the quintessential non-invented here, and they build all their own hardware. They build all their own network and run all their own data centers. They write almost all of their own software. I mean, they're basically a software company, so it's very unique for them to be able to license the technology. I will say that it is going very well, and you should be on the lookout for some additional announcements with regard to our work with this social media company in the near future.
Okay, perfect. Do we have questions from the audience? I know Brian had a question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Andy. Yeah, I think I've got a couple questions that are kind of tied into the same, I guess, angle of exploration. One is where you are on your sales staff and any new hires. And I'll go ahead and throw the second one just because it just kind of ties together a bit for me. But, we've spoken a lot today about the financial services sector or vertical. And, I look at EY and, tax practices around the country. I mean, to me, there's so many desirable verticals for you. How do you determine how you're going to allocate those resources? How do you prioritize which sectors make the most sense for you? You spoke about, I'll say, the hurdles that you have to go through working with a multinational bank and how that may stretch your sales cycle. How do you juggle all of this and prioritize what you're going after?
Yeah, it's a great question, Brian. So a couple of answers. I think I had stated previously, we just hired 2 brand new salespeople that started, in fact, this week. So we're pretty excited about that. That brings our total to 7. Plus, we've got a VP of sales, an EVP that's working on the banking channel that effectively is sales, and then we've also got our senior VP of services who does a lot of the land and expand and sales. So essentially everybody's selling, but 7 core salespeople today, and we're going to continue to grow that base. With regard to channels, yeah, it's definitely a challenge. So if you kind of take a look at the company, we've really kind of stayed focused on supply chain and within a couple of different verticals, including CPG, food and beverage, manufacturing, electronic manufacturing in particular, where we saw a plethora of kind of spreadsheets used within the business, and that's kind of what we think about. An industry that we have not gone into that I would like to, but we're not ready yet, would be into kind of the pharmaceutical industry, where there's a lot of manufacturing and there's a lot of need. But frankly, I've not let the company go into those areas because we just haven't had the resources or the history to be able to do it correctly. So we're going to continue to focus on supply chain and or in our known areas of expertise, and then really focus the next 12 months on the financial services industry, since now we've got 2 banks signed and, a real interesting, credible story that I think will really resonate with these other banks. But again, utilizing the channel to go after that versus our own direct sales. I mean, Brian, look, as much as we all would like it, if I walk into the CIO's office of a top 100 bank and they look at me, and I could be the best salesperson in the world, but they're going to look at our balance sheet and go, I'm a little worried about you guys. And frankly, if we go in with a partner who is going to make money on the deal and can vouch for us, and we can show these other banks as referenceable customers, that really gets us there. And we think the sales cycle is shortened also by us working with these partners in the banking channel. So I hope I answered your question.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Do you have I'll say a minimum land before you expand amount?
Oh, no, not really. It's funny, when you build these companies, this is my 5th company from scratch now in Silicon Valley that I built. And one of the things that I will point to is that from a technology standpoint, Boardwalk is really, really solid. Like, we've got these patents, we've got this technology that's been vetted by Ernst & Young and Accenture and, Apple and now this large bank. There's really no technology risk here. It works beautifully. We've got, thousands and thousands of people using this in mission critical areas. What you learn as a company as you grow is how to grow. And, this is something that people take for granted. Say, oh, all of a sudden this new market is there. Why don't you go out and sign up, 50 new banks? And it's like, oh, wow, we would all like to do that. You can break a company pretty quickly if you try and grow too fast. So, I'm not holding back, by the way, but you learn, kind of to pace yourself and get that steady, nice growth. And then if you do take off to the moon, you got to hang on it, but you got to learn. The organization has to know how to do this, and that's part of this great learning that we've had through getting into this banking channel and winning this big deal. We now know how to close these. Well, I mean, look, we've closed a lot of big deals, but we now know how to really close a big bank that we can now replicate going forward.
Okay, great. I think that's it for me. Thanks.
Maybe Andy, on the pipeline. So it's right now 7.6 million in first year revenue.
Right.
What would you expect? How much of that should we see in a year or so closed?
Yeah, so we've got a pretty succinct process with regard to putting something on the pipeline. Like, we don't do it unless we've actually, had meetings. There is a legitimate opportunity with budget at a company for us to even put it on the pipeline to flash to you guys to say this is what the number is. Many people will ask on that 7.6 million, how much of that is services versus kind of recurring license revenue? And it's about a 60-40, 65-35%. So when you look at that 7.6 million, we believe that we've got kind of a 80% close rate on that. That's been kind of a good target. And then when you look at, the percentage of recurring revenue first year that will then roll into next year, we're really starting to kind of get our sea legs with regard to this recurring revenue and the pipeline. I'm also very enthusiastic about the new salespeople that we brought on. Both of these new salespeople are, these are enterprise enterprise studs, okay, that have closed deals for a long time. We're not hiring kids out of college. These are guys that have got their own Rolodex, that really know what they're doing. And in fact, when they first come in, companies that they've already sold to, it's so easy for them to go back into and say, here we go, I'm with this new company, let me show you what we can do. And I really think we're going to start to see some nice growth on that pipeline from our investment in these two new salespeople.
And are your salespeople more engaged in getting new customers, or is it also to expand within current customers?
Yeah, so we compensate them obviously based upon net new revenue, and so while they are focused on getting new logos, so these are hunters. We also have some of our salespeople that are farmers that are doing the account management and going back in, doing quarterly reviews with each of our customers, saying where can we be helpful, where's the next opportunity for us, and really thinking about how do you grow that kind of net revenue from each one of those customers to be able to expand and grow. And again, a great example is the Estee Lauder contract that we signed in early 2021, where we now have been able to grow that revenue to that recurring revenue very nicely to $400,000 or $500,000 on an annualized basis, and we think that that's just going to continue to grow. It's a great example of winning a new deal and then landing and expanding across the entire organization, right?
And when you do expand within current customers, how does that process usually look like? Are you approaching the customer with suggestions about where your application could fit in other sectors or in other countries, or is it more the other way around that you get requests?
Yeah, frankly, it's a combination of both. So when we go and we land a new logo, lots of times people will nod their head. So, look, if we're at a conference, someone walks by the booth, right? One of my salespeople or marketing people will look at someone that says CIO of XYZ company and will say, "You guys use spreadsheets in your business?" And they literally will stop and start to laugh. And they say, "Well, of course we do." And then our job is to then say, okay, so, where does it hurt the most within your organization with regard to these spreadsheets? Like, where can we be the most valuable? And lots of times we know where that soft spot is, depending upon the type of company and where those opportunities will be. Once we, and so that's kind of how we enter a new company. Once we get in, it's really fascinating to watch the kind of the maturation of Boardwalk within these companies, because we will have people that will become a user within a company of a particular process called the X-ray Niner process. And there's 50 people and they're sharing data in the spreadsheet back and forth. And lo and behold, one of them will say, well, I've got this other process over here that's a total freaking mess. And I've got 200 people on this. And if we could use Boardwalk for that, then we could really knock it out of the park. We could get to our decision 3 days faster than what we're doing today, and it will be much more accurate information because of the fact that we're now sharing the data appropriately. We're integrated with our transactional systems of record, and so lots of times the opportunities will come from within. Other times we'll almost act as a expert to come in and say, okay, so we got this first one done, but we know that this is connected to that, right? So, think about us working a process where, I'll give you an example. So one of our large manufacturers had an issue with packaging management. So you wouldn't think that that's a big deal. This company has got tens of thousands of products that they sell into 150 countries, okay? And every time they change the formula of a particular product, call it a, whatever, they've got to redo the packaging. every time they come out with a new product, they've got to have the packaging figured out. And every time a law changes where you can't have a particular chemical in a particular product, you got to change your packaging, or a law changes and said you have to disclose that this is in your product, right? We all think that this is easy to just walk into a store and buy a product off a shelf, but the packaging and all the information on that packaging is really hard. There's no enterprise application that's out there that someone can go license that says this is packaging management. Guess where all this data is managed? It's in a spreadsheet. It's in a big, hairy workbook that's shared between legal and marketing and the people that are doing the manufacturing, and it's a total mess. This company, in 6 weeks, we automated a process that manages all of their packaging, and the net result was that they were able to get product to market faster because they were able to work through the packaging issues in a consolidated, concise way with history. And that meant a lot to them. You get product to market 2 or 3 weeks faster than what you think, it can make a real difference to your revenue and your earnings when you're a large company. Or just even changing packaging out to meet the new standards for Brexit or whatever these are big deals. And again, all this is done in spreadsheets, and that's the key. Is we digitally transform that from a manual process into a digital process, which allows them to be able to get to decisions faster, which improves the business.
Andy, quick question from the chat. I don't remember if it was on one of your earlier slides or not, but what percentage of new customers turn into reoccurring customers that are actually expanding?
We've never lost a customer since 2018 when we moved over to the SaaS model. And I would say that all of them, all of these customers under the SaaS model, we've seen expansion of revenue or additional users that have come on. Now, again, to be honest, some of them have gone a little bit slower than what I would have liked. We've had a couple that have come on just with one process, and we haven't been able to get them to move to the second or the third or the fourth, and there's reasons why that happens. But for the most part, these guys are continuing to expand, and we need to do a better job as a company in really pushing harder, which we are.
Excellent.
Perfect. I guess one last sort of commentary from me. You mentioned this transition from the perpetual license model to the SaaS model, and we had basically flat to down revenue in the past couple of quarters and years. But I guess it's safe to say, considering the big deal you landed recently, that the times of shrinking revenues are basically gone, and from now we should see nicely growing revenues.
Yes, that is a true statement, and we're enthusiastic about it. In fact, in our fiscal year ends March 31. So when you see that quarter, you're going to see a little bit of the result of the large bank contract, not a lot. But let's just say that I am anxious to get our Q1 results out and would love to issue them as soon as we can, right? Because it's going to be a real pleasure to be able to watch the reaction with regard to this nice growing recurring revenue.
Perfect. Yeah, and with that, I know you have a hard stop, so I guess we end it here. Thank you very much for the great update, for your great answers.
Yep. Thanks, Florian. I really appreciate Breakout Investors and all you guys do for us, and appreciate the opportunity.
Perfect. Okay.
Good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Some or all the speakers may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast. The views in this podcast expressed are those of the speakers, not Breakout Investors. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Neither Bracket Investors nor any of its affiliates makes any representation or warranty, express or implied, as to the accuracy or completeness of the statements or any information presented by this podcast and any liability, including in respect of direct, indirect, or consequential loss or damage, therefore is expressly disclaimed. No one on this podcast is an investment advisor, and no one is providing investment advice. Before investing in any company's stock, you must do your own research. Thank you for listening.